What is up, guys? It is Daily Duma. Today, I'm going to be talking about the illusion of progress. What do I mean by this? Well, in society at large, all I see, all I hear in any media is this progression of every basic metric in life. Like, for example, the Dow Jones keeps going up. Everybody says, for racial equality, we are actually getting better and better each year. Life expectancy going up each year, things of this nature. So there's this narrative being spoken in the general populace that we are progressing in all these metrics. However, I feel like in a lot of cases this is an illusion. Now, to justify my position, there are certain things like, for example, the advancing age at which we die at, like let's say, the actual age of mortality, that I do think are progressing. And if you look in the past, it's just statistical fact that these are getting better in terms of we are living older. But in a lot of other metrics, I think this is very skewed to give you a false sense of progression, and we are actually backsliding and getting worse. Perfect example, home ownership. I think this is something almost anybody in America can see that is just complete lies in terms of, the media at large saying that we are progressing. For example, in 1950s, 1960s, I was looking up statistics. Homes costed like between $3,000 and $5,000, and people were making like around $1,000 to $2,000 a year on average, like the median average. If you think about that, that means that a home costed about 3 years of wages. That was really realistic. I mean, think about it. It does cost a lot of materials, a lot of things to build a home. But realistically, if you can pay for that in 3 years of your wage, that seems, very, very reasonable. Whereas nowadays, let's say a median home might cost $300,000 to $500,000. In my area, it's close to $500,000. And this is in the Midwest. There's a lot of places that homes are even more. However, we're making on average, $30,000 to $60,000. So if you think about that, homes now cost 10 years of wage. But that doesn't make a lot of sense because if you think about the technological improvements, we should be able to make homes much easier, much faster, much safer than before. So why are homes dramatically more expensive than they were 50 or 60 years ago? It doesn't make a lot of sense. Even if you look in construction in general, how was, the Great Pyramids of Giza built, thousands of years ago, but yet in modern engineering, we haven't even gotten close to replicating feats of this when we have all these technological advancements. A place that I lived a few years ago, Cape Cod, Massachusetts, just to rebuild one bridge that was built in like 1 to 2 years in the 1950s, 1960s was going to cost upwards of $2 billion and like 10 years to build. So things have gotten slower, they've gotten less efficient. Uh, you know, Bureaucracy and paperwork has just, infiltrated the society to a point that actually doing something is not the problem. It's actually just getting the ability to do that. So there's a huge illusion of progress in this way, and actually a backsliding compared to what things were before. Another thing I think that is kind of this, illusion is like on racial and social issues. Even though I do think there is less racism in America, I do think there has been some positive metrics in this regard. I think it's pretty obvious that there still is significant racism in America. And what I think is actually shocking about that is not only from, the prototypical sources you might think, where it's that, white against, others, but I actually think it's actually racism in between ethnic groups, ethnic groups being racist to each other. So I think this is something, again, there's an illusion of progress, and there's this kind of, narrative that it's basically the Caucasian population being racist is the primary driver, where, yes, that was a significant factor in the 1950s, 1960s, and before. It is definitely a factor in the past, but that isn't the only source of racism in the current day. And I think there's a bit of an illusion of progress here, especially when you look at how society is functioning and the breakdown of, the melting pot, I guess you could say it. If you think about American society as kind of a melting pot that we're all trying to come together and, kind of, respect each other's individuality, but we do have to merge societally in order to function. And I think that's actually really going down the tubes. I think we see that, right? Radicalization, we see people splintering away, we see political, divides growing. I think this illusion of progress is really apparent in this. There's been no time in history, I think, in America where the political parties and things of that nature have been more divided. Now, again, as if you want to look back in my previous videos, you'll hear me talk about, and I'm going to make a full video in the future. So if you like that, please hit the like and subscribe. But I don't think the political parties actually matter that much because it's really corporate interest in capitalism that control America, right? So that means that there's these wealthy people that control the industry, that control the lobbying groups, that therefore control the population, the politicians, and the politicians basically control, the laws and how things are done, and therefore they control the population by proxy. You can kind of see this now. It's actually coming out, with the Donald Trump presidency. It's kind of, or upcoming presidency. It's coming out in the open. Like now, Elon Musk is just in calls with, like, Ukraine, for example. So it's becoming very apparent that these corporate interests, these, very wealthy individuals, are basically controlling the government. And I think we've all known that for a long time. But what is surprising is how apparent it is and how it's actually coming out, directly in the open. It's not even being hidden anymore. So I definitely think that this kind of illusion of progress is, this is a very 1984 dystopian kind of theme. I think that's why it makes a lot of sense for Daily Doomer, because realistically, this is kind of like in 1984, where, the chocolate ration was cut down and then, quote unquote, added or, increased. And people thought, oh, this is fantastic. But it's actually just going back to, even less than what it was in the past. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. Like people think, there'll be a big recession, there'll be a big downgrade in quality of life. Like, for example, apartment sizes will get smaller, they'll get more expensive, then things will get marginally better. And now, because that, water level has risen and people have gotten used to those new higher prices, now even a small reduction will be seen as, a big improvement where people just don't have long enough memories. They're not seeing that things are actually backsliding and getting worse. And that's been my experience as a millennial. I've noticed that, even though in my personal life I'm happier now because of many factors, I think just growing wiser as an individual. Um, Mostly, I've seen America backslide and things have gotten a lot worse. Another thing that I think really contributes to this is the lack of connection and the lack of, communication due to social media and phones in general. Even though I'm recording this on a phone, I think phones do have their place. They have very important functions. People should not be on their phones 8 hours a day. It shouldn't be your primary means of communication with your friends. It shouldn't be the way that you interact with the world. Uh, I was very lucky. I didn't even use a smartphone until I think it was 21 years old when I was growing up. And I think that really helped me. I was reading books. I was, listening to lectures. I was, like talking to people on the street, like actually interacting with people. My father and me traveled around a lot, so I got to live in a lot of different places as a kid. And that doesn't mean I was wealthy. Like I think when people hear this, they think, "Oh, well, you were just a privileged person. You kind of came from this privileged background." I'm going to go into that in a future video, but believe me, there's nothing further than the truth. I was actually, very disadvantaged and quite poor. Um, but due to certain circumstances, we were moving around, extremely. And I think that's the thing that people have to realize now is, are these things in your life aiding you? I think there's a big backslide, for example, in the pharmaceutical world right now. People are being told, you feel sad, you need an antidepressant. You feel, like you feel tired, you need caffeine. All of these emotions, all of these states of emotion are being treated with, basically pharmaceutical agents. I don't think this is a healthy mindset to have. I think this is a very destructive mindset. I grew up in that ADHD era, so I was prescribed Ritalin and things of that nature when I was a kid. And I can tell you that ultimately it did more harm than good. That doesn't mean that it didn't have some positive benefits. It definitely helped me study harder. There was definitely some positivity, but this drug pushing culture is just horrible. It's a really really negative aspect of the American society in general, and I think it's very funny because, like for example, in the early 2000s, they were pushing opiates, all of these opiates in terms of pills, and then now there's a big opiate epidemic. But now they're actually suppressing opiates to patients that actually need them for pain management. I see this, in hospitals all the time, and basically a drug that was being pushed 15 years ago is now being demonized. And I've noticed that in American society where what tends to happen is something is pushed as a virtue and then 10 years later it's demonized and it's said, oh well, we were actually foolish back then but now we know better. Well, if you were foolish back then and now you somehow know better, don't you realize, like, shouldn't it come into your kind of concept of mind that you may be fooled now as well? Like, isn't this a possibility? And I always think this to myself too, like, whenever I have a belief that I feel very strongly in now, I remember, when I was younger, I had a different set of beliefs, or I had, a different conception of the world. And so therefore, I have to be very vigilant. I have to remember that I don't know everything. Actually, I don't know the majority of things. I think the smartest way to think about things is I know very little, but I'm more inquisitive, I'm more curious, and I can think cleaner and clearer. And I think that's the thing is when you completely remove any sort of pharmaceutical agents, you remove any uppers and downers in your life, you remove the caffeine, you remove whatever, if you're taking any illicit, drugs or medications. When you remove all that, I think you're going to see that you are going to think a lot clearer. Now, don't get me wrong, working in the medical industry, there are some people that, drugs are life saving to them. If you have, let's say, for example, schizophrenia, there is absolutely cases in which this is helpful. But I'm just saying, I think this is, again, illusion of progress. What we are doing is band-aiding a problem, not fixing a lot of the core issues, because in a lot of cases, the core issues comes down to lack of communication, lack of human connection, over reliance on social media and the digital world to kind of give us fulfillment in life. And I think what the reason is if we looked at how society is going, that there's less human connection, that things are more expensive than they ever were, that, soaring food prices, apartments are getting more expensive. The job economy is absolutely terrible. I think this is another illusion of progress. I don't think I've ever lived in a year, and this is being recorded in late November of 2024, that the economy was worse. And, they're saying that Dow Jones is doing great and all of these economic measures are fantastic. Unemployment is down. I'm going to talk about that in a separate video, specifically the economy and unemployment. But let me just say it's fake statistics. If you work at a job 15, 20 hours a week, like I was doing at, let's say, Walmart or Target, you technically are not unemployed, but you can't actually pay your bills. That's not actually going to generate enough income for you to live your daily life. So realistically, you should be counted as unemployed because this quote unquote underemployment statistic, includes almost everybody. Like, are you able to save enough for retirement? Can you pay all your bills and not worry about, basic life? That's very few people. Most people are living paycheck to paycheck or in debt. And so, therefore, I really think a lot of these statistics are skewed in a way they're either directly manipulated or they're indirectly manipulated, where the reality is far different from what they are trying to, what they are trying to get you to perceive. They are trying to get you to, they are skewing statistics in a way where they're giving you the partial truth, but the conclusion which they're drawing from these statistics is not the reality. And I think that this is something that is happening a lot in modern day. And so, in my opinion, there's been a huge illusion of progress. I think, if anything, we're actually backsliding. I want to hear your take. Please leave me a comment down below. It really does help with the YouTube algorithm. But more importantly, I want to see what your guys' take on this is. Do you believe that life has gotten better? What's your age? I would love to hear from Generation X, the boomers, even anybody older than that, and really see what your take on it is, as well as the younger people. What do Gen Alpha and Gen Z think? Personally, I think it would be an absolute nightmare to grow up in the current society with how much cancel culture is and how much things are regulated and kind of like you have no freedom of speech realistically anymore. It really is becoming a dystopian state in that way. You can basically be canceled for anything you've said right now and also 20 years in the past, which is just outrageous because we have to remember society was very different back then. I can tell you very clearly that the things you were allowed to say in early 2000s were much, much larger than what you're allowed to say in common society now. I'm going to be talking about this as well in a dedicated video. So please let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you believe there's an illusion of progress, or do you think this progress is actually genuine? Thank you guys so, so much, and I will see you in the next video.